we are back here at Radio Free DC, the G. Gordon Liddy Show. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to welcome back to the G. Gordon Liddy Show an old friend. He is Sheriff Richard I. Mack from Safford, Arizona. He's the county sheriff at Graham County, Arizona. And a lot of people, I think, know that I have a second home in the state of Arizona. I love it out there. I have great feelings for it. And Sheriff Mack is he is a Democrat. He is someone who comes from a law enforcement background. His dad was a special agent of the FBI. Both he and his wife are fourth-generation residents of Graham County. He attended Safford Elementary Schools. He's got a BA degree from Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. He worked his way through college. He became a police officer in 1979. He's been through the Utah Police Academy, the Arizona Police Academy, the FBI National Academy, the National Correctional Institute. And in other words, this man is a trained, skilled, educated, and experienced law enforcement officer. He's not someone who is, let's say, a barber. There's nothing wrong with being a barber, who just decided he'd kind of like to be the sheriff, and suddenly on a groundswell such as we just had, ends up being the sheriff. Now, this is a professional law enforcement man, and he has a view that is contrary to that of the liberals with respect to gun control in general, and with such things as the Brady bill in particular. And he is the author of a fine book, a really well-done book. It's called From My Cold, Dead Fingers, Why America Needs Guns. And he's co-author with Timothy Robert Walters. And you find this book is a photograph of a woman arm, and she's holding a snubby Smith & Wesson, and it's lying on the ground, and I'm assuming that those are the cold, dead fingers. At any rate, what I find so good about this book is it is a reasoned, rational argument that goes to the very legal underpinnings, or lack thereof, for the whole gun-grabbing movement. And what is remarkable is that here we have an experienced sheriff who has taken on the establishment, and he has sued. You see, his department, along with all the others, was charged with carrying out the Brady bill, given, and I'm sure you'll correct me, Sheriff Mack, if I'm wrong, given no money for the federal government to do it, and just said, go ahead and do it. And rather than just blindly obeying the federal government, Sheriff Mack studied the law, its underpinnings, the Constitution of the United States, and he said, wait a minute, they can't do this. And he sued, and the media was all over him, and then he won. And now he can't get arrested in the media. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right, Gordon, and it is great to be back with you. I've really enjoyed meeting with you when you were in Tucson.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
A few weeks ago. And yes, it is true. The media was really after me, wanting me to do stories nationwide. Dateline NBC called, the Today Show called. I was on Good Morning America. I did the Phil Donahue show. And now I called these same people that either got me on their shows or were trying to get me on their shows, and I faxed them information, and I've told them how now 4 sheriffs from across this country have won lawsuits declaring the Brady bill to be unconstitutional. You would think that would be a bigger story than just filing the suit.
You certainly would, but unfortunately, I think they don't want the word to get out.
No, and none of them will give me the time of day now. The same exact people that were calling me before won't even return my calls.
Well, frankly, that does not surprise me. So,
no, it didn't me either.
All right. Well,
I was surprised that they called me to begin with.
Yeah. Well, Sheriff, let's go into that. Now, you filed a lawsuit and you've won the lawsuit,
yeah.
And I would like to know how you attacked the Brady Bill legally, what your argument was, and what the courts said when they agreed with you.
Yes, okay, that's a real good point. First of all, I don't work for the federal government. It's an employment issue. I am a government employee, but I work for the people of Graham County. Mm-hmm. They pay my salary. I don't work for the federal government. Mm-hmm. I actually tried to be an FBI agent at one time. I wasn't accepted, so I pursued... I
can't believe you weren't accepted. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a guy, he's 6'3", he's 215 pounds, black hair, blue eyes. He's 41 now, but I'm assuming you were a lot younger when you applied.
Yes.
He's just a very picture of the kind of guy that J. Edgar Hoover wanted as a special agent of the FBI. And I don't know.
J. Edgar was gone.
Oh, I see.
I put in, and that's one of the big problems. The FBI became another bureaucracy after Hoover left.
It sure did.
Yeah.
It sure did, yeah.
And my father left about that same time that J. Edgar did. My father retired in 1974.
Okay.
But anyway, I didn't get in, and so I work for the people of Graham County, and I told the federal government, I don't work for you, and you can't be telling me what to do. Mm-hmm. And not only that, the 10th Amendment says you can't. Mm-hmm. And then the Brady Bill also threatens to arrest me if I don't comply.
Well, wait a minute. Now, just so that folks will know what we're talking about here.
Yes.
The 10th Amendment says, this is the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. And let me explain something, ladies and gentlemen. The general police power that resides in the Crown of England, and which resided there during our colonial experience, when we became free, that general police power did not devolve upon the federal government. It went to the several states, not to the federal government. And so the only power that the federal government has is that which is specifically given to it in the United States Constitution. The rest of it all just resides in the states or ultimately to the people. That's I'm just trying to explain to them, Sheriff, what the 10th Amendment says.
So anything outside Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, where it says what Congress can and cannot do, has to be referred to the 10th Amendment.
Right.
That's why that 10th Amendment was put there, to clarify to Congress, if you think there's anything you can do outside your constitutional authority, it must be referred to the states or to the people.
Correct.
So then, when we finally got to court, Judge Roll from Tucson, Arizona, a federal district judge, stated the following. The court finds that enacting Section 18 U.S.C. 922 S2, which is a portion of the Brady Bill, Congress exceeded its authority under Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, thereby impermissibly encroaching upon the powers retained by the states pursuant to the 10th Amendment. And then it states, and mine, of all the cases that were filed, mine was the only one that also found the Brady Bill to be unconstitutional under the 5th Amendment, where it violates my due process rights.
Yes, because it said they were going to arrest you if you didn't do it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So they said no, and the judge issued an injunction against the enforcement of this Brady Bill, and he made that to all agents of the federal government.
Oh, that's great.
Yes.
That's super. Now, one of the things that, you're absolutely right here, and one of the ways that over the years, down through the more recent years, the federal government has attempted to get around the argument that you've just made, in which the court just upheld, is they've gone to the Constitution, and they said that Section 8 of Article 1 says that the United States Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. Now, of course, what the Founding Fathers meant when they put that in there was quite clear. In those days, you had a lot of protectionist trade barriers from one state to another, and they didn't want to have that. They wanted to be able to trade freely between the states, so they put that in there. But what so many courts have helped the federal government in usurping the authority they've said that, well, so long as anything even touches upon or affects interstate commerce, why we will give the government, the federal government, the right to jurisdiction in that area.
Yeah.
So with respect to firearms, they'll say, well, a Smith & Wesson comes from up there in Massachusetts, and so when we're talking about a Smith & Wesson down there in Arizona, it obviously moved in interstate commerce, and so we are going to grant the federal government the jurisdiction in there. How do you get around that?
Well, the main thing is that, yes, they can oversee the sale of that first firearm.
Mm-hmm.
When it first, regulation right there, the federal government has the authority to regulate it, the first sale. But after it gets to my county, they have no business getting involved in it. And then trying to force me to do background checks on good, honest American citizens,
Mm-hmm.
when they haven't committed any crime and have not been suspected of committing any crime, subject themselves to a background check, a criminal background check, for merely exercising their God-given and Second Amendment guaranteed rights.
That's right, and I like the way you put that, because it shows, Sheriff Mack, that you truly understand the right of American citizens of self-defense and everything else, because the masters of the English language that the founding fathers were, that's why they said that the right shall not be infringed. They didn't say we give you the right. In other words, they know that a human being has, as such, an inherent right from God to be armed, and they're simply saying we're not going to infringe upon that right. And I find it interesting. I just want to make sure that I understand your argument, which has been upheld by the courts. The federal government can control or regulate the first sale. In other words, the sale of, say, 20 Smith & Wessons from the factory to X gun store
in
Arizona.
Sure.
But then once the gun store it goes, it's a retail gun store, starts to sell them separately, it doesn't.
No, it does not. That's clear. And then the state of Arizona takes over, or the county wherein the gun shop resides and does business.
All right, sir. Well, Sheriff, we've got to break for a few minutes now for some crass commercial messages. We will come right back to you and more of this, I think, very important conversation.
The G. Gordon Liddy Show, Radio Free DC.
And we're back here at Radio Free DC, the G. Gordon Liddy Show. Now, we only have a few minutes before we come to the automatic shutdown because we'll be turning the hour. But Sheriff Mack has graciously agreed to stay with us. And another thing I would like you to know, everybody, is that we have invited a representative of Handgun Control, Inc. Now, that is a pro-gun control group, and a representative of another opposing group to participate in this discussion. We hope to hear from one of them very soon. Perhaps one will call us by telephone, and will join this debate, if you will. We would certainly like to do that. But before we go off, I want to tell you how this is a marvelous book, this From My Cold Dead Fingers, and it's published by Rawhide Western Publishing. And anybody who wants a copy of this book, and I urge you to get one, it is brilliantly clear, easy to read. This is not a dull textbook-like tome. This is it's a paperback. It is modestly priced, and if you want to get one, there's an 800 number for you to call. And just copy this down, folks. 1-800-428-5956. Or you can write to Rawhide Western Publishing at Post Office Box 327, Safford. That's spelled Safford, Arizona. And the zip code there is 85548. And, one copy is only $14.95, for heaven's sake. And those of you who are disposed to hand them out to friends of yours and things of that sort, they've got special discounts that run all the way up to 500 copies where you can, save a heck of a lot of money. And really, this is a book that should be in every home. It is that good. Now, Sheriff Mack?
Yes.
Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for this hour of the show. If you will stand by, sir, we'll be going on for some more, and we understand that Handgun Control Inc. representative will call after the break.
Good, I'm ready for him.
All right, so am I. Okay. And it is I, G. Gordon, and this is indeed Radio Free DC, the G. Gordon Liddy Show. And we have been having a conversation with Sheriff Richard Mack from the Graham County Sheriff's Department, Safford, Arizona, on the subject of gun control in general, the enforcement of the Brady Bill in particular. And we have now been joined, I understand, by telephone by Cheryl Brolin. She is a spokesperson for Handgun Control Inc., which is a pro-gun control organization. Ms. Brolin, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Let us get to the point here. On what authority does Handgun Control Inc. believe lies the power of the government to in any way infringe upon the right of an individual citizen, not a criminal, not someone such as myself, Ms. Bowen, an individual citizen who has never been convicted of a crime, to keep or carry a firearm?
We don't. We believe that guns, because they are dangerous weapons, should be subject to some common sense restrictions. And that's the kind of legislation that we support.
Well, I don't find anything in the Constitution, in the Second Amendment, about common sense restrictions.
Well, you also don't acknowledge the first part of the Second Amendment, which reads that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. But all of that put aside, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I think that when you look back at all of the court cases, the Second Amendment has never been interpreted as meaning an individual's right to keep and bear arms. It also has never been proven to be preclusive of common sense restrictions. And I think that's true of all of our rights. I mean, you can't walk into a crowded movie theater, yell fire, and claim First Amendment protection.
Well, that's correct, but I would challenge your contention that it has never been held to be an individual right. Indeed, the history of it is that it has been held to be an individual right. As for the militia, certainly I recognize that portion of it, because I do understand what it meant and continues to mean, and that's simply every able-bodied male, and I would suggest now probably every able-bodied female. But Sheriff Mack, would you like to be heard on this?
Oh yes, absolutely. That her entire contention has absolutely no basis. Common sense is subject to opinion, but the Constitution, and especially the Bill of Rights, was written specifically to tell government and to make sure government understood these are the specific God-given rights that government cannot alter, change, or infringe. And you cannot. In fact, HCI, Sarah Brady, Richard A. Bourne, all of them that would try to disarm good, honest American citizens, none of them can quote any of the Founding Fathers to give them any basis or any backup for any of their philosophies.
No, but we can quote from, newspaper story after newspaper story that shows that...
You can quote from Hitler.
I'm sorry, could I finish, please?
Sure, go ahead.
I can see story after story where guns have had a tremendous impact on all of our lives. Again, you keep saying we want to disarm American citizens. It's just not so.
Yes, it is.
But I think when you see examples of how laws like the Brady Law work, then you can see that they are in the best interest of public safety.
Can I respond to that now?
Can I finish my statement first? We have just found out here, I don't know if you had heard about it, that the young man who shot at the White House with an assault weapon just a couple of weeks ago had initially flunked a Brady background check. He tried to buy handguns first and was unsuccessful because the law prevented him from doing so.
Okay, and all HCI, you included, everybody was bragging about how great it was that the Brady bill has been so successful, which is a bunch of trash, because you've prevented thousands and thousands upon thousands of felons from getting guns. And they bragged about that in Phoenix. Yet the crime rate and the murder rate in Phoenix has gone up ever since Brady came into effect.
Well, I would like to challenge. Yeah, I'd like to challenge just one other thing in this argument, that Ms. Brolin asserts that this Mr. Duran, I think it was his name, who fired upon the White House, did so with an assault weapon. First of all, it's not an assault weapon. And neither is, for that matter, are any of the weapons banned by the recent crime bill. An assault weapon is defined by the United States government through the Pentagon as capable through a selector switch of firing fully automatic. That means you depress the trigger once, it'll empty its magazine. The SKS semi-automatic rifle is not one of the ones even banned under the crime bill.
Well, I'd like to point out that the term assault weapons is not something that we made up. In fact, Gun Digest, which I understand to be pretty much a Bible for gun buyers, has recently published their second edition of the Gun Digest Guide to Assault Weapons, and right there, blazoned on the cover, is full and semi-auto. So, this is not something that is a figment of our imagination.
The Bible for the gun lovers in this country is the Second Amendment, and also the Founding Fathers. And the Founding Fathers were specifically clear on that this was an individual right. In 1982,
the Founding Fathers didn't have to worry about driving down a highway and getting shot because they were going too slowly.
No, they had to worry about going through the woods and getting shot, and they wanted to be able to shoot back.
The principles of freedom, and that's why I just ask the people of HCI and anybody that's wondering about gun control being effective, just study the history of our country and just learn and understand that the principles of freedom do not change because our cities are bigger or because our weapons are more sophisticated. These are principles of freedom that we're talking about here. We are the people in charge of this country. We founded this because we were able, and our founding fathers and the colonists and the farmers and people of this country were able to grab their assault rifles, if you will, out of their closets and go and defend our country against tyranny. And that is why the Second Amendment was established. And if it happens again today, then we, the people, the free, sovereign people of this country, need the capability to do the same thing if we have to.
We, the free, sovereign people, overwhelmingly support common sense restrictions like the Brady Law. We, the sovereign people, are suffering an incredible epidemic of gun violence. Certainly, gun control is not the only answer to the problems of our society.
It's not an answer at all.
But we have to recognize that, you talked about the murder rate. Well, the murder rate with every other kind of weapon has gone down by 11% since 1987. Handgun homicides have increased by 52%. Again, we see this as a tremendous problem in our society that needs to be addressed, and we think that common sense restrictions on what is a very dangerous, unregulated product is the way to go.
Well, I love the word regulation. Now, Ms. Brolin and Sheriff, if you'll excuse me for just a moment, you are attacking, it would seem to me, the wrong enemy. Now, let us assume, for the sake of argument, that all the statistics you have just quoted are absolutely correct, that X number more people have been killed, harmed, injured, wounded, whatever you want to say, through the use of one form of firearm or another. The firearm itself did not do that. I could have a firearm here of any kind you want, pick the one that upsets you the most, and I could load it and cock it and put it down on the table in front of me, and we could all walk away from it and stay away for 1,000 years, and assuming rust didn't reduce it to a powder, nothing would happen. It requires human responsible agency. Someone has to pick it up and use it. Now,
you're absolutely right.
All right, now that someone who picks it up and uses it can use it either for good or for evil, just as they can a knife or a hatchet or something of that sort. Now, the problem that you were complaining of is that there has been an increase in the number of people who have used it for evil purposes. And I would point out to you, by the way, that over 1 million times a year it is used for good purposes. It frustrates a crime. Now, it would seem to me that the thing you would want to do is to go after the people who use it for an evil purpose and punish them and inhibit them from being able to do that again.
And leave the rest of us alone.
Exactly. Why do you pick on an inanimate object, which is just a simple tool?
Again, I'd have to say that I don't see this, and we don't see this as, and I think the majority of Americans don't see this as picking on anybody. I think that what we see it as is trying to protect people. That goal, excuse me, can I please finish? The goal is to save lives. Certainly there are better things to do than to interfere in your business. That's hardly anyone's intention. I believe that the intention, and I honestly do believe this, is to save lives, that they want to protect the lives of the more than 38,000 Americans who are killed every year with firearms.
But it's not working.
Yeah, Ms. Brolin.
Well, but you also talked about the people and the laws. We've had laws forever that say that murder is a crime. That hasn't stopped murder. So should we get rid of the laws? I don't think so.
No, we need to enforce those, which we haven't been doing. We haven't been using capital punishment in this country for the past 3 decades. We need to go after them. But with everything you say, you talk about we the people. You don't have the bulk of the people behind you in this. The election just showed that. The gun issue was a major, major issue in several races around this country. All of them running pro-grab gunners lost. Every one of them.
Well, I'd have to,
the people behind you. Excuse me, let me finish. And then you sit here and say that the Brady bill has worked, and it has failed. Even since the last few months that it's been in existence, it has failed. Violence has gone up. Murder, Phoenix alone just set a record for murder the last 2 months in a row. It has completely failed, and you and HCI continue to tell the people that, we need more gun control then. This isn't making the streets safer. You and everyone knows that with these laws are not going to get criminals to give up their guns, and they are still going to get guns. You know it. Everybody knows it. The only thing these laws affect are the good, honest American citizens, and you need to leave them alone because these are our constitutional rights. And your laws and any other law must pass the Constitution, not common sense. It must pass the Constitution.
Well, as I said, I believe that it has. My understanding of the 11 or so court cases has been that gun control has been allowed to stand, that gun control has not, that the Second Amendment has not been seen as preclusive of gun control laws. But again, let me point out, the success of the Brady Law is once again in evidence today when we hear that the young man who shot up the White House was prevented from buying handguns. And I think that this is the goal, is to make it more difficult. Yes, you're right. A criminal will always find a way to get a gun if they want one. But you know what? Right now, we're handing them out like lollipops. And I think that that's what people want.
Handing them out like lollipops?
The unfettered access to guns by anyone who wants them.
By good, common, ordinary citizens, it shouldn't be a problem. You say that police should be armed? Why should police be armed if the citizenry should be disarmed?
Well, again, we're not talking about disarming the citizenry, so that's a spurious argument from Jump Street.
No, well, you guys have completely taken away assault rifles, and you just said with your own statistics that we should be attacking those that are really involved in crimes.
Ms. Brolin, I just want to...
used in commission of crime.
I would just suggest, Ms. Brolin, if they had let Duran buy a handgun, he would have had a much less potent weapon with which to pepper the White House than a semi-automatic rifle. All right? And the other thing I would just like to remind you of is the last time the Supreme Court of the United States considered this case was U.S. versus Miller. It was in the 1930s, and Mr. Miller was accused of having a shotgun with a barrel that was too short, according to the federal statute. And his lawyer, said the Supreme Court, neglected to put in any evidence, if evidence there were, that it was of military use. Because if it was of military use, he would have been allowed to have it. Now, the fact of the
clause?
Yeah, military use. In other words, the the founding fathers and everything, all the rest of them, the weapon would be military use. Now, by that logic, we should be able to have real assault rifles, which are capable of fully automatic fire.
But we can't. And
well, no, we can't. No, we cannot legally. We cannot legally.
Pro-gun people consistently point to machine guns as an example of, here's a gun that's never, ever used in crime. Machine guns are legal, but they're never, ever used in crime. Well, of course they're not, because they have the kinds of restrictions on them that we believe should be applied to all guns. They have a background check. They have a registration, that there has to be a record of the sale on file.
So an obsolete weapon. That's why they're not used.
That's right. Let me explain something. I was in the FBI, Ms. Brolin, and we had in every single FBI field division, we had a big vault that was filled with weapons of every kind, because we were the FBI. We could have anything we wanted to. And we had lots of submachine guns, Thompson submachine guns. You see them in the movies all the time, like that.
Yep.
Whenever we went out on a situation where we thought there was going to be serious interpersonal differences, no one, I never saw anyone ever pick up a Thompson submachine gun. You know what we all got? We all got 12-gauge cylinder bore pump shotguns with double-aught buck. And if you know anything about firearms, you know that is the deadliest of them all.
I'd like to respond to one of the things she was saying. That even government statistics and the Gary Kleck survey that a liberal person actually put together, a professor from Florida, it proves that a handgun use is absolutely, without question, the safest tool to use in defending yourself against a would-be attacker.
I think that you should tell that to the father in Monroe, Louisiana.
I want women in America to understand that, and we point that out in my book. And in fact, I'd like to have you have a book of mine, because this cannot be argued. This is absolutely the safest way to defend yourself and your family and to keep yourself safe against any attacker.
I suspect the father in Monroe, Louisiana would argue with you there.
Well, Mrs. Liddy wouldn't argue with him. Mrs. Liddy used 357 Magnum to drive, when I was in prison and couldn't do it, to drive a guy out of our house, a burglar who had burst into the house. She pointed it right at his head, cocked it, and told him she was going to blow his brains out if he didn't move right now, and she did.
Again, I have to point out that nothing that we support would prevent Mrs. Liddy from purchasing a weapon if she wanted to. I mean, that's the point that I don't know how I can possibly stress it enough to you and have you understand that we are not in any way at all trying to prevent law-abiding citizens from the ability to purchase a weapon.
Well, Brady say just the opposite, and I've seen her articles in magazines where she said, people, if you want to help, don't go buy a handgun. That just makes our country worse.
That doesn't mean to say that we want to prevent people from their ability to do that. We're saying make a wise decision. Make sure you are armed with the facts before you become armed with a deadly weapon.
Ms. Brolin, would you...
Why are you trying to keep the best and safest tool for American people, especially women? Why are you trying to keep them from having that?
Because for every statistic,
way to defend yourself,
just like with everything else in this entire debate, for every statistic that you can come up with to prove why guns are a viable option for people, there are countless statistics that prove the exact opposite.
No, there are not. That is a gratuitous assertion unless you give me the countless statistics.
Oh, well, I can give you 3 from Dr. Kellerman, who in one study showed that guns are more likely to be used against you than that you will be able to use them to defend yourself. And not necessarily used against you by the criminal, but the gun that you talked about being on the table would more easily be picked up by someone in the midst of an argument and used, whereas it would take more time and effort to find another weapon. It is the ease with which you can use a gun that makes it so dangerous.
Ms. Brolin, Kellerman and Rie, that was the one you're speaking to, calculated their comparison. They did not include those cases. They only counted the times a homeowner killed the criminal. Because only 0.1%, that's 1 in 1,000 of defensive gun usages involves the death of the criminal. Actually, they understated it by a factor of 1,000. They turned the truth on its head. That is a bogus
look at the Bureau of
statistic.
Justice Statistics report that show that less than 1% of all victims of crime were able to successfully use a gun to defend themselves. Let's look at Kellerman's most recent study that showed that a gun in the home is 3 times more likely, or that a gun in the home leads 3 times more often to a homicide in the home.
Indeed, it does not. Indeed, it does not. As a matter of fact, Kellerman's own standards shows 43 times comparison to be superficially appealing, but it's actually a deceitful contrivance.
Well, so is the million uses of Gary Clark. That's a deceitful...
They are not. It's between 1 and 2.4 million times a year.
Full contrivance, I believe, was the word.
You're misleading the American people, and you're telling them that these add to violence, and it goes back to what Gordon Liddy was just saying, that they're not conducive to violence. 85% of the people in this country don't commit crime. And these laws that you're perpetuating, of which I'm very proud to announce that because of the people that were elected just a day or two ago, Brady Bill movement is dead. Brady Bill 2 will die now. Brady Bill 3, 4, and 5 will have no chance. And all these subtleties that HCI is pushing upon the American people to help take away their defense and their God-given rights, it doesn't matter about all these statistics. Everything goes back to the Constitution, and it must pass what the Founding Fathers established as our form of government, that government officials may not and cannot infringe, alter, or change unless they change the Constitution. And that is not changed. This is how our country was founded in the first place. And all these good ideas or benevolent purposes or your good intentions don't matter if it can't pass the constitutional test. And this cannot. And not only that, but it cannot pass common sense, because these are the best ways to defend yourselves in this country.
Well, all right. I tell you, Ms. Brolin has been very generous with her time. We do have to go to commercials again. And Sheriff Mack, you've been more than generous with your time because you're on an earlier hour. I want to thank both of you for being guests on my program. And ladies and gentlemen, again, if you want to get a copy of Sheriff Mack's book, the name of it is From My Cold Dead Fingers. It is available to you by simply telephoning 1-800-428-5956. Thank you both very, very much.
Thank you.
The G. Gordon Liddy Show, Radio Free DC.
The folks who have held on through the press commercial messages will recall just before we broke for those messages, I was on the phone with Fred, who was from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and he had a lot of really nice, generous comments about me. And in the interest of fairness in broadcasting, I would like to give you an alternative view. This is another letter from a fan. And the only way, frankly, that we could put this on the air was for me to record it and for my brutal, tyrannical Stalinist producer, John, reluctantly to use the bleep button in several places. Otherwise, we'd be in a lot of trouble with the FCC. But here is an alternative view from that of Fred from Cape Cod.
Dear G-Man, what the does the G stand for, wise ass? Grammar, you and your correct English. You asshole. I can't believe me ears when I hears yous talking about bad English. You devote all that time to that. Why don't you become an English teacher and do us all a favor and get off the radio, you arrogant asshole? I am purposely f***ing up a lot of my English and typing to aggravate your prissy ass. You brag about your manly parts to ugly, homely girls from Virginia. Nixon says you're only a half an inch long. I will say this, I would rather listen to you than Rush Limburger. The best part of your show is when the listeners speak up and talk about how you like to eat rats. It takes one to know one. Signed, a fan.
Oh, man. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, a contrary view. Oh, my. All right, here's one. This is unsigned. It just says to the G-Man. It says, this is why guns are legal in Virginia. And there's a clipping here from a newspaper. It says, Fairfax man, 19, is fatally shot in holdup attempt. A 19-year-old Fairfax County, Virginia man was fatally shot Thursday night during an apparent holdup of a gas station in the Dunloring area, police said yesterday. William E. Henry of the 7400 block of Bethune Street in the Falls Church area entered the Sunoco station about 8:35 p.m. wearing a mask and displaying a handgun, police said. An employee of the station in the 2200 block of Gallows Road pulled out a handgun of his own and shot Henry several times, police said. The employee was not named and the investigation is continuing. And that is indeed a very good reason why guns are legal. And this, let's see, this is from Frank and Bill in Stafford Springs, Connecticut. And it says, G-Man, this letter was published in our Hartford Courant newspaper. This date. The Israelis and the Jewish people know what the consequences are of gun control. And the letter, the headline of it says, Gun Control Leads to Genocide. It is signed by J. Edward Simkin, Research Director of Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership Incorporated, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The October 15th editorial, quote, offensive billboard, end quote, savaged Jews for the preservation of firearms, use of Adolf Hitler's image on a billboard. The editorial said that our views were offensive and silly. Wrong. We have proved that genocide is the downside to gun control. Gun control assures that the intended victims and those who might want to help them are disarmed and helpless. In 7 major genocides from 1915 to 1980, 56 million persons, including millions of children, were murdered. Ottoman Turkey, 1915-1917. Soviet Russia, 1929-1953. Nazi Germany, 1933-1945. China, 1949-1976. Guatemala, 1961-1981. Uganda, 1971-1979. And Cambodia, 1975-1979. Gun control laws pre-existed these genocides. In 5 cases, the genocide regime inherited gun control from a predecessor regime. Jews for the Preservation of Firearms has published the authentic original texts of these laws with translations. Among them is the Nazi weapons law of March 18, 1938. It is based on the Democratic Weimar Republic's 1928 gun control law. On November the 11th, 1938, new regulations barred Jews from owning firearms or other weapons. Gun control in Nazi Germany promoted 13 million murders throughout Europe, 6 million Jews and 7 million Gentiles. Gun control is a vile policy because it promotes genocide. Yet gun control's dazzling surface appeal, safe streets, blinds its backers to the mountains of corpses behind the glittery facade. We use Hitler's image to shock people into looking behind the facade. Most see the reality. At least 250,000 Rwandans were murdered between April and July thanks to gun control. The government published the law on December the 1st, 1994, I think that is. This law explains how so many Rwandans were murdered so quickly by so few. As a Jewish group, we have a duty to save lives by ending genocide. We must destroy gun control. Thus, Jews for the Preservation of Firearms welcomes righteous people of all faiths. J. Edward Simkin, Research Director, Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership Incorporated, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I could not say that any better than Mr. Simkin has presented it. All right. This is from Mr. A. Cameron O'Brien from Alexandria, Virginia. He says, Dear Miss Liddy, I thought you might like to see my 1994 G. Gordon Liddy. Secondly, as to your stomach muscles. Now, the usual sit-ups will not do the job. They are something which tend to exercise the external flexor muscles rather than the abdominal muscles. What I would suggest you do is lie down on your back in front of a sofa or an overstuffed chair, good sturdy one, and put your butt right up against the front of the chair and put the back of your calves, lie your legs on the seat, and then put your hands behind your neck and do what are called crunches. Come up as hard, as far, and as tight as you can, back down, etc. And when you go back down, don't go all the way back down. Just keep that tension on there. That will isolate the abdominal muscles, and it will give you a good, strong stomach. It will not take any fat off your stomach. If you want to lose fat, what you're going to have to do, in addition to exercising, is reduce your caloric intake.
Anyway, the reason I'm calling, among other things to speak of, is the notions about AIDS and AZT. I'm a skeptic, and I've got lots of degrees and all that in math and science-related topics, and I was hunting in the library for a book like UFOs or something to pick on, and I ran across John Lauritsen's book, Poison by Prescription and the AIDS War, and I thought these would be easy to take apart and dismantle as logical arguments because I knew what everybody else knows about AIDS, and in fact I was impressed by the way that he documents his researches and documents what he's been finding out about it. His background is in statistical analysis of scientific...
What is his conclusion about AZT and AIDS?
His conclusion, there's a number of conclusions, and the basic upshot is that at the very least, we don't know what causes AIDS. Mm-hmm. And also, HIV is not shown to cause AIDS. And most importantly, AZT, which has been around for many years, is a deadly poison. It was originally designed to be a chemotherapy treatment, mm-hmm. but was deemed by the FDA to be so severe and basically didn't do much to cancer that they decided that they couldn't allow it to be used.
Wow. And
so the notion is, which is where you get the notion for what would make a nice movie script, is that here you got this deadly drug, which isn't any good for anything. So what you do is you start a PR campaign that says AZT will cure AIDS, and the very panicked people who have it...
well, we know it doesn't kill AIDS.
Cure AIDS. Originally they came out and said the study showed that it improved people's lives who had AIDS.
Well, sir, unfortunately, we have unfortunately run out of time, but I...
Get him as a guest.
All right, good idea. Thank you.
Westwood One Radio Networks.